Well, a big story, Dr. Miranda, is a story of my parents and their marriage, and that's central to a lot of the messages. I dedicated this book to my parents, whom I love, and they've given us such a great, heritage and legacy. However, there was pain in that marriage after 36 years of marriage. I thought at one point, I used to think, in teenage years, I had the perfect family. We loved each other and still do, but then divorce became a part. Devastating. And I was an adult at that time, and I thought about, wow, what kind of effect does this have on kids? If as an adult, this thing is devastating to me. And learning the art, if you will, of forgiveness, being able to forgive my father, and actually in the latter years of his life, our relationship just coming to such a depth and a bond. God sent him out to California. I'd kind of gotten away in California, and I said, okay, I leave my Boston life behind. And
Jonah.
Yes, Jonah. Sort of a Jonah, yes, sort of a,
painful.
Fleeing from the painful past, starting afresh, starting anew. And God wanted me to have that. He wanted me to begin to live life and not be burdened down. But life comes full circle. God, we have to deal with life. And he will give us some time to get away, but we have to return again if we are to move forward. So they're returning to move forward.
And there must have been healing.
There was very healing.
Because perhaps your emotions would be very different now regarding your family, your father, that reconciliation that took place, but you're being able to come back and go through that painful process perhaps of forgiving and working through all of that pain. I mean, it makes you now probably a much stronger human being, much more reconciled to yourself, and able to appreciate more that figure that had such an important
role.
In your life,
And one of the things I realized in forgiveness, that unless you realize that you too could have done the same thing, unless you realize, I learned forgiveness because I think growing up in church, for some of us church people, church girls, church boys, we grow up thinking we're pretty good. We feel like we're pretty good people. And whenever you think you're that good, you have to understand, to be able to understand grace. I find that people who have lived what we would call the life of debauchery, or they've lived out there, they get it. Like the woman who came with the alabaster box, she knew she'd been forgiven much. But some of us think we're really good. We really think we're good. And so to have experienced something like that life-altering event, to realize, first of all, that, wait a minute, not that there are no guarantees in God, but we're not immune from the pains and the struggles of life as a believer. God redeems it. That's what salvation is all about, the redemption of it, but we're not immune to it. And to realize that there, but for the grace of God, go I. My father was not any, he was a good father in many ways and gave us a legacy of faith. But to realize that I could have done the same thing, Dad, and to be able to forgive. And the other thing I learned about forgiveness, when you're truly forgiven, when you have the ability to hurt someone, and you waive that right because you understand that you too have offended God. And to be able to take care of my dad in his most vulnerable times of his life was a difficult experience, but it was also an honor that God would put me in a position like that to be able to care for him.
Absolutely. You've worked as a screenwriter.
Yes.
And of course, that leads me to think that you are intrigued by storytelling and by literature and so on. And one of the things that I found in my own studies of literature, that was my specialty before I entered into the pastorate.
That's wonderful.
But I've always seen God, perhaps because of that literary training, as a master storyteller.
Ah, yes, he is.
And I seeing creation and the human journey as God's master novel with a multiplicity of characters. The fact is, God can write stories using living elements. We are consigned to a page, or to a computer text, but God animates his characters and his stories.
So true.
And I think ultimately, really the entire human journey, from A to Z, is really this master storyteller, populating this immense universe with characters that somehow he's able also to allow freedom too.
In that.
Like a novelist also sometimes impacted by his own characters, and he doesn't even know where they're going to go ultimately.
Right.
The more complex they are, sometimes they surprise him or her themselves by turning up, something else that wasn't expected in the initial journey.
You're so deep.
But this is the thing that he's not interested in a simple story. A simple story would be where everybody behaves well, or at least the ministers behave well.
Yes.
And, they have a kind
perfect
of a
life,
linear journey.
Yes.
But he, as a master storyteller, is interested in the grays and the nuances and the contradictions and so on.
Beautiful.
And so that's why we honor him precisely in that textured journey that we undertake, which includes moments of drama and pathos and suffering and loss and failure and getting up again, and he revels in that.
And discovering about your own self, your own their idiosyncrasies, and we discover in life that I thought I was this, and then all of a sudden this situation has brought out this other side to me, because we really don't know ourselves as much. The suffering and the struggle and the adversity of life brings out the best and the worst of us. And I see, as you said that, it reminds me just of the disciples. Jesus chooses this motley crew. We see it. I want to read a section here, though.
Yes, please.
I want to read a section here. What I talked about is a chapter that talks about perseverance as a true mark of champions. And the way we overcome is by really persevering. Perseverance is the key to overcoming. There's many other things we do. But we overcome because of the DNA of God in us as overcomers. Whoever is born of God, 1 John 5:4 says, overcomes the world. I says, as Christ followers, we have the DNA that furnishes us with all the internal resources we need to overcome in this life. We belong to an eclectic but proud family legacy of God-fearing ex-prostitutes, repentant murderers and adulterers, converted liars, previously weak warriors, disrespected but undaunted prophets, unflinching martyrs, fearless judges, and former slaves turned princes. This motley band of heroes and heroines were all heralded as faithful because they persevered. All that said, what's most important is that we belong to Jesus because Jesus persevered and has overcome, and because we all possess his DNA, we also share in his victory.
Beautiful.
It talks about
I remember that passage.
What you said about the eclectic group of people and characters that God uses, prostitutes and all kinds of, people who murdered in their life, and God uses them to prove that his power is made perfect in our weakness.
So that when we fail and struggle and falter, really what we're doing is we're living truly authentic Christian lives in the style of those heroes of the faith.
Yes.
We're not somehow out of the biblical narrative.
No,
actually,
we're not.
We're perfectly in it.
Because
we are exemplifying all those values that
absolutely.
God
and we're not saying going out and fail, but we understand how we respond to failure has a lot to do with overcoming. Sometimes we become so surprised at ourselves, which sometimes is self-righteousness. What made you think that you could fall vulnerable or prey? So we become self-righteous and we begin to beat ourselves up. That can happen. But if we understand the grace and the mercy of God, that in our failure we can get back up again. And God showed me Christians are no different in the sense that God reigns mercy on the just and the unjust. We face the same things. We're not immune to the struggles of life. The difference is that we outlast the enemy. The difference is that we keep rising up again. We fall 7 times, but we keep getting up again in the resurrection power of Christ. That's the difference, that a Christian never stays down for a very long time.